And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a game that was originally designed as the result of a contest held by another show that I do called Board Rumors, which is essentially a roundtable discussion about certain board game topics. We had a contest where you were to design a game using only several cards and some counters, and we were going to judge those games and pick a winner. And this was one of the submissions to that, not the winner, but one of the submissions, and that game is called Guile, which is a game by Terra Nova Games. In this game, each player controls 4 knights at a round table, and you're trying to have the most influence on your knights at the end of the round by moving that influence around and checking what influence you currently have. So real quick, why don't we take a look at what you get inside of this box and how the game plays, and at the end we'll come back here and I'll sum it all up for you. So here you can see the components for Guile all set up. Now what we have here is a ring of 8 knights, and these knights alternate color. We either have King Arthur's knights, Sir Tristan, Sir Galahad, Sir Bedivere, and Sir Ector out here in red, or we have Sir Mordred's knights, which are Sir Lancelot, Sir Palmades, Sir Kay, and Sir Gawain here. I don't know how to say that one, but it doesn't matter. And each player is going to control one of these sets of knights. In the center here we have a sword, which is indicating that Sir Ector here is the first knight who will be taking an action. And on the outside here we have a turn marker that's showing that, again, he's the first one to take his action, and then we're going to move this around as each knight gets to take their action around the table. We've dealt out influence cards, and this is a bluffing and memory game in which you're trying to have the most influence on your knights at the end of the round. So we have influence cards. Each player will get 4, and on these you'll see they have values from 4 down to 1. So this one has a 4 with a dagger, which is a tiebreaker. If there's a tie in influence at the end of the round, whoever has the higher number, and then whoever has the higher number with the dagger will break the tie. But we have a 4, a 2, a 2, and a 1. So that player has those cards. This player over here has a 1, a 2, a 1, and a 3. And then there are 2 cards that have been dealt out. There are always 2 cards that are removed from the hand. These will just come back in the next round, or may be back in the next round. 2 will be dealt aside randomly. After each player has been dealt their cards, there's going to be a card draft. So these players are going to pick up their hands. They're going to choose 1 card from their hand to keep. This player will probably keep the 4. And they're going to pass the remaining cards to the other player. Of course, this player would pick their 3 and pass these over. So real quick, we'll simulate that draft, and after we're done with that, we'll come back here and show you gameplay. Now that the draft is done, each of our players has 4 cards again, and this player has the 4, a 2, a 2, and a 1, which is basically, I think, what they started with, but that's what they got again, and this player, again, is going to have a 3, a 2, a 1, and a 1 after the draft. So, they each have their hand of cards. Now, starting with whoever controls Sir Ector, the red player, that player is going to place out all of their cards onto their knights, so they get to place a card onto each one of their knights face down. Maybe they place their 4 onto Sir Ector, they place a 2 onto Sir Tristan, they place another 2 onto Sir Bedivere, and they place their 1 onto Sir Galahad. And then the blue player is going to do the same thing with their cards, placing them all out. So maybe the 3 goes on Sir Kay, the 2 on Sir Palmades, the 1 on Sir Lancelot, and the other 1 on Sir Gawain. And now that they're all set up, they're ready to begin the game. So as I said, now that we're all set, we're going to start. And basically, we're going to start with the first knight here, Sir Ector. We're pointing at him, and we have the turn order marker next to him. And he has a choice of 2 actions. He may either look at this card on his own knight, or he may pick this card up and switch it with any other knight. Any knight at the table. Could be one of his own, could be one of his opponents. Now, we already know Sir Ector has a pretty good card, so he already knows what it is, but he may not want to switch it. So maybe he decides to look at it as his first action, just so that he doesn't have to switch cards. He looks at it, and it's a 4. And at that point, his turn is done, and now we move on to the blue player, who's going to take an action here. And he can either look at this card, which he already knows what it is. He knows it's a 1, not very good, but he takes a play off of Sir Ector, who didn't want to move his card, that this card's probably pretty good. So he decides instead to take the other action, and that action is to swap 2 cards between knights. Now, you don't get to look at them, so he'd have to remember that this is a 1 and assume that this is a good card, but he's going to swap the 2 cards between these 2 knights. And then we'd move on to Sir Tristan. The red player takes another turn, and he has the choice. Either look at this card, which he already knows what it is, or swap it. So again, you're going to take these actions around the table until you get all the way back here. Let's just assume I took an action with each of these knights, and this came back to the start player. At this point, we're going to flip over this marker in the center to show that we're on the second round, and you'll see it has coins and a Celtic knot in the background to symbolize we're on the second round. Once we get to the second round, you're going to take these same actions again. So again, starting with Sir Ector, we're going to go ahead and either swap his card. Maybe he decides to swap here to here. And then we'd move on to the next. We can either look at his card, so he decides to look at it, and continue on around the table, either looking at your card or swapping cards until we get all the way back around a second time. Once we're all around the second time, we're going to reveal all of these cards, and we're going to count up whoever has the most influence on their cards. So we'll take a look here and see what the final values are after we flip them all over. So now that we flip them over, we'll see that red has a value of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But we can see that blue clearly has a value of at least 7 plus 2 more is 9. So blue is going to be the winner of this round. And they would go ahead and they would take a victory point marker to show that they've won one round. Now, if there had been a tie, the daggers, or the higher number, would go to break this. So whoever had the 4 would break the tie. But if both 4s, one of the 4s was removed, were out, and they were on opposite players, and they still had a tie, the one with the dagger would break the tie, and that player would get the victory point. After we finish this, we're of course going to take all of the cards off. We're going to move this over to here. Everybody's going to get dealt their cards again after we've shuffled in the ones that were removed the first time, and there's going to be another draft for another round. And you'll play in this manner until one player has won 2 rounds, meaning they get 2 victory point markers, and that player is the overall winner. So you'll see it's a fairly simple game. Now, they've included some advanced roles so that you can have a little bit of a different play style if you would like. We have 3 of them. We have Isolde here, or Isolde, and she's going to be a card that gets shuffled into these influence. You'll see they have the same back, so you could get dealt these special cards instead of an influence card. But if she gets played out, either on Sir Tristan or on Sir Palmades here, she's going to copy the highest card that that player has on one of their other knights. So if she's here, and there happens to be a 4 value card out on Sir Bedivere here, then this card is going to be a 4 as well. So that's a pretty good way to be, and the same thing if she's on Sir Palmades. In addition to that, we have Morgana. And Morgana is going to cancel the card that's to her left, or counterclockwise. So if this were here and there were a 1 on Sir Ector, Morgana will make this card a 0, and she's a 0 herself. Finally, we have Merlin. Merlin looks like this, and he's going to copy whatever card is directly across from him. So if he's here, and we happen to have a 2 over here on Sir Bedivere, Merlin is going to be a 2. However, if Morgana is across, and Morgana is a 0, as are all of the special cards, Merlin will be a 0 as well. So you can add these in if you'd like to have a little bit more flavor to add to your game. Well, there you have it. That is Guile from Terra Nova Games. Now, as I said, this was designed to be a pretty minimal game. You only had a few cards and some counters to work with when the game was designed, so I can understand that the game is relatively simple, and it is that. It's a very simple game. The game is all about bluffing and memorization, but at the beginning of the game, you really have very few choices to make. You've played your cards to the table. You should, if you have a decent memory, remember what they all are, and until somebody switches a card that you need to remember or take a look at what it is, you really don't have a reason to look at that card, unless, of course, you don't want to swap. And there is a little bit of a decision to be made in that, but overall, the number of choices you have to make in the game aren't what I would call astounding. Adding in that extra couple cards that give you the special abilities mixed in with the influence cards does change the game a little bit. It adds a little bit more, but again, you're still dealing with what's dealt to the table, and you may not even know that one of those cards is out there in order to play forward accordingly until you swap and then pick it up and look at it, which may never happen. So overall, I'm not going to call this a great game. It is a mini game, or not quite a micro game, but one that is designed to be relatively simplistic, and if you're looking for something to pull out and put on the table, it's not bad for that. But overall, not a great game, not one that I'm going to keep, on one that has too few choices for it to be really interesting for me.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.